The rain had settled over the Belgian countryside in long streaks of cold silver, a curtain pulled over the land as if the sky itself was reluctant to witness another morning of war. Corporal Thomas Redgrave wiped the mud from his brow as the motor convoy crawled along the narrow road that cut through the Ardennes. 12 trucks carrying food, ammunition, medical packs, everything the 3rd British Infantry Division needed to survive another month at the front. Thomas, seated in the passenger side of the lead Bedford truck, stared at the tarped stacks behind them. Crates, tins, fuel cans. And near the top, a pile of bricks. Real bricks. They were meant for a small field repair team that had, for some reason, developed an obsession with reinforcing their field kitchens with makeshift ovens. For Thomas, it was just another odd chapter in an increasingly absurd war. But something about the load bothered him. There had been no requisition order for masonry that he could recall, and the quartermaster hadn't looked him in the eye when handing him the cargo manifest. The man's hands shook just a little. Enough for Thomas to notice. Enough for the seed of worry to take root. The convoy slowed as it approached a ravaged stretch of road pocked with old shell craters. The smell of damp earth and oil filled the air. To the east, a single farmhouse lay abandoned, its windows blackened and broken, its stone walls clawed by shrapnel. A perfect image of what Europe had become, a continent hollowed out from the inside. Thomas leaned out the window and scanned the roadside. Something felt wrong. He couldn't name it, couldn't explain it, but it churned in his gut with the same quiet insistence that had saved his life more times than he could count. Behind the truck, Private Ellis, young, wide-eyed, and still hopeful in ways Thomas could no longer imagine, was slumped against crates, humming a tune his mother used to sing. Then the rear truck backfired. Or so Thomas thought. A dull crack echoed through the air, followed by a strange metallic ringing. Something had fractured. Something inside the cargo. Thomas twisted around, eyes narrowing. One of the bricks near the top of the pile had split, a thin fissure running through the clay surface. No, through something hidden beneath. A sickening realization coursed through him. That was no ordinary brick. And the war, once more, was about to teach them all that the enemy's most dangerous inventions were the ones disguised as ordinary life itself. Sergeant Harold Merton didn't believe in superstitions, but he did believe in patterns. The Germans were methodical, creative in their cruelty, masters of deceptive engineering. And as he knelt beside the cracked brick in the back of Truck 6, he recognized the familiar smell of trouble, chemical, metallic, sharp. The fractured object sat innocently enough, but its weight was wrong. Thomas hefted it with both hands and felt the internal shift, a soft clunk like loose metal rolling within hollow clay. Ellis approached, face pale. "Sir, it's ticking." Merton didn't answer. He pressed his ear against the fissure. Not a tick, more like a faint electric buzz. A timed charge or a vibration fuse. Ingenious. Terrifying. The Germans had created exploding coal before, black lumps packed with explosives meant to sabotage locomotives. But a brick? That was new. And far more devastating. Thomas stepped back. "We need to unload this whole truck. Now." Merton's mind raced. If this brick had been placed deliberately among supply cargo, others might be hidden deeper inside. Worse, there was no guarantee the trigger required motion. Some devices were pressure-sensitive, detonating when stacked or jolted. He ordered the convoy halted. Engines died one by one along the muddy road. Soldiers dismounted, confusion blooming across faces as whispers spread. Booby-trapped brick. By the time the tarp was pulled off the supply truck, the mood had shifted. No one joked anymore. No one hummed tunes. Thomas organized the men into a chain, lifting crates with the precision of surgeons performing a risky extraction. Every wooden box thumped softly as it passed between hands, each thump a small roulette spin with death. Ellis handled one of the remaining bricks. "Feels normal," he said, tapping it lightly. The moment his finger touched the surface, the brick emitted a soft metallic ping. A panel inside had shifted. "Drop it," Thomas roared. Ellis froze, breath caught in his throat. His face drained of color as he placed the brick down as gently as a mother laying a newborn to sleep. The soldiers backed away slowly. Merton crouched beside the pile, studying each brick. Some were real. Others were indistinguishable fakes, unless you knew exactly what to look for. Rain tapped softly on the truck roof above them, the sound of a long countdown. The Germans had found a new way to infiltrate the British supply chain. And unlike bombs dropped from the sky, these weapons hid in plain sight, waiting patiently for their moment to tear men apart from the inside. 2 nights later, the sabotage was no longer an isolated discovery, it had become a contagion spreading across the British rear lines. Reports trickled in like distant thunder. A depot destroyed in Lille, a transport barge lost on the Meuse, a warehouse north of Liège reduced to burning splinters. All of them had carried construction materials. All of them had stored bricks. Thomas and Merton were summoned to a provisional command tent where lantern light danced across maps riddled with red pins. Captain Doyle presided over the chaos, his spectacles fogged by the damp as he paced. "These aren't random," Doyle said, his voice trembling between fury and awe. "German operatives are slipping these devices into our logistical arteries. They're not targeting soldiers, they're targeting the bloodstream of the entire army." Merton studied the pins. "They know we're expanding forward fortifications. If we can't build, we can't hold." Thomas added, "And if we can't trust our own supply crates, paranoia will do half their work for them." A young intelligence officer produced a clay fragment recovered from one blast site. Inside the shard was a wire no thicker than a hair, wrapped around a tiny glass capsule filled with a viscous black liquid. "A destabilizing compound," the officer explained. "Shatters the brick casing outward on ignition. Maximum fragmentation." Doyle clenched his jaw. "We need to find out how they're getting these onto our trucks." That task fell to Merton's detachment. Thomas, Alice, and 4 others were assigned to escort a new shipment from a distribution depot rumored to be compromised. The depot lay deep within reclaimed territory, surrounded by forests that whispered even when windless. They arrived under moonlight. The facility looked quiet, too quiet. Storage sheds lined the perimeter like hunched silhouettes, their roofs sagging under accumulated rainwater. A faint odor lingered in the air, brick dust and diesel. Inside Warehouse 2, Thomas found what he feared. Several pallets of bricks had been disturbed. Clay chips littered the floor. A set of muddy boot prints led to a side door. Someone had been here within hours. Alice pointed at a narrow storage rack. "Sir, look." Tucked behind a stack of real bricks lay 3 fakes, exposed as if placed in haste. Their surfaces were too smooth, their edges too sharp. German precision masquerading as British utility. Merton felt the weight of the war shift again, subtly but undeniably. Saboteurs moved freely behind their lines, ghosts wearing British uniforms. And somewhere out there, a hand was still planting these deadly bricks into the arteries of the Allied advance. A brick wasn't just a brick anymore. It was a message. The trail led them to a small railway junction near the border, where fog hugged the tracks like a living thing. The station had once bustled with civilian commuters. Now it was a skeleton crew of soldiers and engineers coordinating the endless shipments that fed the front. Thomas walked the length of a stalled freight train, lantern in hand. Each wagon held building materials. Lumber. Cement. Bricks stacked in neat cubes wrapped in burlap. War had turned even the simplest objects into threats. Alice climbed onto the last wagon and froze. Someone's been tampering. Merton joined him. Several stacks had been opened. Some bricks replaced with fakes. The saboteur wasn't scattering them randomly, he was selecting specific loads, targeting routes with the highest strategic value. Then Thomas spotted movement, a shadow slipping between rail cars. "Halt!" he shouted. The figure bolted. Thomas took off, boots hammering against the wet gravel, heart pounding in rhythm with every stride. The saboteur sprinted toward the tree line, slipping under the skeletal branches. A single gunshot cracked through the fog. The shadow stumbled but kept running. Thomas tackled him before he could disappear into the dark. They tumbled through mud. The man's cap fell away, revealing German features and cold blue eyes filled with resignation rather than fear. Merton and Alice arrived. The saboteur spit blood at Thomas's boots. "You British," he whispered, "you rely on structure. We destroy structure." Merton searched his coat and found a forged British depot badge. "He's been moving through our lines for weeks," Thomas said. Ellis asked, voice trembling, "How many bricks did you plant?" The saboteur smiled. "Enough." But his next words chilled them more. "Not all of them explode from handling. Some wait until heated. Until placed in ovens, barracks, field kitchens." Thomas felt his stomach turn. These bricks weren't just designed to destroy trucks. They were designed to destroy morale, routine, domesticity, the illusion of safety. A sudden explosion echoed from the distance, back toward the rail yard. The saboteur laughed through bloodied teeth. Too late. Thomas didn't wait for orders. He sprinted back toward the yard, praying the explosion was small, praying the saboteur was bluffing. But as he crested the hill, orange flames licked the night sky. The deadly bricks had awakened. The explosion at the rail yard had consumed the rear section of the freight train, sending shards of metal and clay across the tracks like a monstrous scattering of seeds. Fires climbed the wooden crates, devouring them hungrily. Soldiers rushed with buckets and hoses, shouting orders drowned by the roar of burning diesel. Thomas felt the heat on his face as he arrived. One of the fake bricks had detonated, likely when a soldier moved it aside, or perhaps triggered by accumulated warmth inside the tightly packed wagon. Either way, the sabotage had delivered its final blow. Merton barked commands, mobilizing a containment line. Ellis joined the firefight, coat soaked with water and sweat as he battled the flames. Thomas searched the surviving cargo, hoping the worst had passed. But in the flickering light, something caught his eye, a faint glimmer inside a cracked brick, identical to the first one they'd found days earlier. He lifted it carefully, eyes narrowing. There was no timer. No vibration fuse. This one used a chemical delay triggered by humidity, ingenious and horrifying. The Germans had diversified their designs. There could be dozens of variants. No army could inspect every brick in every crate across the entire front. He handed the device to Merton. "We can't just react anymore. We have to stop the bricks at the source." But the saboteur, now detained and bleeding heavily from his wound, simply murmured, "There is no single source. Many hands. Many routes." The war, Thomas realized, had entered a new phase, one where battles were fought not only with tanks and rifles, but with infiltration, misdirection, and corruption of the very materials meant to sustain life. In the days that followed, British command issued emergency protocols. Supply depots implemented inspection lines. Convoys traveled with sapper teams trained to detect disguised explosives. Crates were cross-checked, bricks broken open, anything suspicious discarded. Yet even with precautions, accidents continued. A field oven exploded in Ghent. A storage room collapsed in Maastricht. A mechanic was killed in Antwerp when a brick shattered under the heat of a stove. The Germans had weaponized the mundane. Thomas stood beside the smoking remains of the railway wagon, watching engineers cut away burnt metal. The air tasted of ash and regret. War always found new ways to turn ordinary life into instruments of death. Coal, food cans, letters, and now bricks. He picked up a real brick, rough, heavy, honest. "We'll still build," he whispered. "Even if they try to tear us down from the inside." The war would rage on. But so would the will to endure.